over to Excel. So now in Excel, what you have noticed is I have put in my trials here. And what I have is I have trial A1, and I can't write in Excel using my pen. It doesn't allow me to do that. So I'm going to use the cursor here. So you're going to see is trial A1. I have my time and my absorbance. Now for you, you would not have a time equal to 0 and have an absorbance value initially because nobody was able to get this puppy in right away. But again, remember all of my data is fake. So please don't worry about that. Also, do not look at entering in time of seconds is 0 and the absorbance is 0. We're not going to use that data point in this particular lab. Okay, so do not use 0, 0 as a data point. Now, what we'll find is I have trials A1, B, C, and trials A2, because this is what I want to compare in order to find the iodate order of reaction. Now, this is my raw data. And so what I would like to do is, of course, I would like to graph this. So if I'm looking at, here's my X and here's my Y value. If I were to highlight this and say insert, over to the chart, I want to pick the scatter graph, and I want to pick the one where there are no lines connecting them. So I'm going to choose that right here. And you'll notice the chart shows up on the worksheet. I don't want it there. I'm going to move up to move the chart to a new location, and I'm going to say new sheet here, and I'm going to type in, you know, whatever I want for the name. And so you could do that, whatever you want. I personally would say something about the reaction order of, iodate or whatever. I would do something, but I can say chart 1. It doesn't matter. Now, what you'll notice here is I do want to deal with typing in a chart title, okay, and I can just highlight that, whoops, and hold on a second, with my tablet here, I do need to move my screen around now. So I'm going to delete this, and I could talk about the absorbances of and we're looking at the triiodide in trials A1, A2, B, and C versus, and notice it's lowercase, time. And then I can just hit return. Now, this is a spelling error here if this is not a subscript. So if you highlight the 3 here, go up to Home and look at Font. If you click down here for font settings, you can choose Subscript and hit OK. And now the 3 is subscripted. You can do the same thing for the negative sign, except it is now superscripted. And you can do the same thing for trial A1 and subscript that, and trial A2 and subscript that. So this is all under the Home tab under Font. It's always the y-axis versus the x-axis. Now, I'm going to go back to formatting or designing my graph. I want to insert a chart element, and so I want to make sure that I am labeling the axes. So here with my axis title, I can say I am measuring time, and then I want to put in parentheses my units. I've also made sure that I have capitalized my axis title. I'm going to move my graph title back here a little bit because it's not centered. I'm going to go up to Add Chart Elements again, and now I want to look at naming the vertical axes here. I'm going to highlight that, and so I'm just going to have the absorbance of I3 minus, okay, and I can, oops, put that there. And again, I can highlight, this is a little bit trickier, the 3, and go up to Home, and I can subscript that, and I can do the same thing to the negative sign. Okay, so imagine that I've just done that. Now, I also want to have in here a trend line. Okay, now I have a trend line, but I want to add a trend line in terms of more options. So let's do that over here. So over on the right hand side, if I look at this graph thing, I do want it to be linear, but I do want to display r squared and the equation of the line next to it. Now I can go over here and I can move it to the end of my line here. And then I also may want to look at some options in terms of my numbers. So if I click on the box here, notice that the number category is in general, and I actually want it to be in numbers, and I want 5 decimal places after that. So you'll notice it has changed the equation of my line. So again, if I click on the equation of my line and go over here to the text options and select from general to number, and then type in that I want 5 decimal places after this, you're going to see that I have 3 significant digits within the slope then. Okay, now I can also add a legend. So I would like my legend on the right. And so what we can do here is we can look at my lovely text here. And we're good. And once we have some other graph on here, what we can do is we can say, hey, let's look at the name of this baby. Whoops. Oops. And I want to just click on that. So let's go back and show you how I did that. So up here it says I want to play around with series number 1. Now notice here it says edit the series. So I can actually say this is trial A1. And so say OK, and so now it is labeled the blue line as trial A1. Now I want to add more graphs to this particular graph sheet. So I'm going to go up to select data, and what I have here is I want to add some data. Okay, so I'm going to add some data, and I'm going to say this is trial B. Now, in order to do this, I want to go back to my raw data and click in the box that says series X values. And so I want to select all of the X values for trial B. So notice that I clicked on the 0 box and then held down the mouse till I got all of the X values in there. Now for the Y values, I'm going to delete that. And on my raw data sheet, I'm going to hold down my mouse and select all of the Y values and say OK. And so I'm going to say OK here, and you'll notice that trial B now has been graphed onto my graph along with trial A1. Now I obviously want to click on my points here for trial B and add a trend line. And I do want to do 2 more trend line options. And over here I can equation of the line in R squared. And again, I would like to, for my number here, and I clicked over here again on label options, I want to change that to a number and 5 decimal points behind that and hit enter. Now I'm going to move this equation right here so I know where it is, just because I would like to keep that. Now I can also look at the color of my data, and so what if we were to make this red? Okay, so that equation now is red with respect to this red line, so we don't mess any of these things up. So you may choose to do that, you may not choose to do that. It's really up to you. All right, so we're going to go back up and we're going to select more data trials. So we're going to add another one. And so this is going to be trial C. And again, I can click in the box for the X values and go back to my data sheet here. And so trial C,
These are all my X values. And then my Y values, I'm going to highlight those and hold my mouse down and hold them all and say OK, and then say OK. And so we're going to see that our trial C is on here now. I'm going to click on those, and I can just go over here, and add my trend line, more options, and then just scroll down for these. And again, I'm going to move it over to the side. Going to look at my text options and change those to a number and 5 numbers beyond the decimal place. And again, I may want to change the color of this thing just because I may not want to get them all messed up. But again, you don't have to if you don't want to. And so it just matches the color of my line for now. Now the last one, of course, is going to be A1. And so, A2. And so I'm going to add the last data series here. So trial A2. And again, I want to click back on my worksheet where my data actually is residing and hold all of the X values and then delete the Y and hold down for all of the Y and say OK and OK. So you're going to notice here that here is trial A2, and I want to add a trend line, and I want it to be displayed. I'm going to move that one down here a little bit, and I want to again deal with my text options. I'm going to make this guy, since he's a different color, I'm going to make him purple. And I can do that with the text color if I want, or the fill color, either one. And I do want to, of course, where is my label options? There we are. Under my number, I do want 5 significant digits. So trial A1, A2, trial C, and trial B. I have them all on one graph. Now, what I've noticed is I have my subscript on iodide, I have my superscript on the minus sign. Over here I didn't get it on, I got my 3 subscripted, but remember you need to get your minus sign superscripted over here. I have my units, and I have a descriptive title. Notice that I have legends on the side talking about which trial goes to which data goes to which trial. And so I could print this particular graph, and then I would be doing the absorbances of the triiodide in trials A1, A2, and then D and E, and then trials A3, A4, F, and G. And so those would be the 3 main graphs. Now, in looking at these trials, what I've done is I've looked at the slopes. So I recorded the slopes on data sheet number 3, and then I recorded them for trial A1, 2. This is the average. And you can type in here, what is the slope of trial A1? What was the slope of trial A2? And then in Excel, write a equation. So just push the equal sign and then type in average, and you'll notice it starts to look up a function. So if you double click it, say I want the average of this number, and then a colon, and then this number, and then finish out your parentheses, and it will give you the average. Now, what I would like to do is I would like to find the log of the slopes, because remember we want to get the order of reaction out in front. And so it's very easy in Excel to do this. You're going to make an equation. And so here you're going to say I want to take the log of the slope of trial B. And so if you type in log, it gives you your function, double click on it, and then you want to take, just click on the cell you would try to type the log of. Finish your parentheses and hit enter. Now, if you would like to do this for all of these, if you get the solid filled X here and drag it down, it will then look at the log of B20. So here, the log of this one, and here the log of this data point. And so it's awesome if we just drag it down. We could do it for all of these. Now obviously these don't have two values in there, so I can get rid of them, but this is the log of the slope of trial A1 and the log of the slope of trial A2 by themselves. Now you're going to be putting in your concentrations that you calculated from your data, okay? And so I showed you how to do this using the dilution equation. And so you'll have your iodate concentrations from each of these trials, because that's what we have been varying over these 3 trials. And then you'll want to take the log of that. So you'll notice this is the log of D19. So column D, cell 19. And so you can view it in the exact same way. Type in equals the log of. And then of course drag down your cells and it will take the log of all of those. Now I have this just on a separate data sheet here. And so what I can do is I can try to graph them. So in order to try to graph them, what I can do is I can insert a scatter graph. Okay. And so I don't have any data selected though, but I do want to move this to a new chart. So I'm going to say chart number 2. And here I would like to select some data. And so in selecting data, I want to look at my log data. And so I'm going to add this, and I'm going to say this is the log of the slopes of trials A12, 1, 2, comma, B, comma, C versus the log of the, I'm going to type it out, iodide ion. Now I got to find the data. So if I click in the X, I can go to the log data here and choose the X values. And remember the X values are the concentrations. So I'm going to choose those. And then the Y values are the log of the slopes. And I'm going to say OK. And I'm going to say OK again. Now, what I've noticed here is there's a trend line, and I don't want that. So I'm going to go over here. Oops. And see, I'm going to tell it has no trend lines. I also want to go back and maybe look at my chart type. And I want to pick the scatter graph where there are no lines at least connecting the dots. So let's say OK on that. So this is the ugly thing that I get right now. And so what I want to do is actually I do want a trend line. Your data will be much more linear than this. I do want to add a trend line, and it needs to be linear. And of course I do need r squared and the equation of the line put on here. And again, in terms of looking at my text options, I want it to be a number with 5 numbers beyond the decimal place, just because I want to make myself happy. Now, up here in my title, I can subscript A12 by going back to Home, Font, and Subscript. And so you'll notice here I need to put in my Y and X values for my axes. Okay, so in the end, what you could have is the log of the slopes of trials A1, 2, B, and C, the log of the iodate concentration with the brackets, and then you could have background if you want. This background can be changed. It can be solid. There's lines here if you want that. You can go back and play around with the looks of this graph any other way. So I can go back to chart 2 and I can just have it look like this, but make sure that I label my axes. Okay, and so what we'll find is we now have one of our next 3 graphs. So this is looking at the slope. And so if we look at the slope of our line here, this is an order of reaction then. Remember, you want to report it on your summary sheet to 2 numbers beyond the decimal place. So in this case, it would be 0.23 rounded off. Okay, and so that's what we would report as the slope of this particular line. And so it is the reaction order for the iodide ion. Then you could go back to raw data and look at trials A1, A2, D, and E, and graph those all on one graph, and then A3, A4, F, and G. And so using Excel is going to be a really good thing for you. It makes this lab go really, really fast. So if you have any questions about what you need to graph, please come and see me. But you'll notice here is in trial B the log of the slope of trial B. Okay, that came from a graph. And what was the log of the concentration of iodate in trial B? So that is one data point, the X value and the Y value. In trial C, the X value was the log of the concentration of the iodate concentration in trial C, calculated from that table of all the things that you put together in the cup. And then the log of the slope, okay, so we get that from a graph for trial C. And so you'll have 3 data points. So if you have any questions, please come see the instructor, or you can also go to the STEM study hall and ask another instructor. Okay, but this is the graphing for this week. Excel, this graph, when we go up to print it, it is an entire sheet. That's what I'm looking for, is an entire sheet as a graph. Okay, because I would like to be able to see that entire thing. Okay, and so we had our chart 1 over here, so I just want to look at our XXX, and we have colors if we would like. So I can print this out in color so that the instructor can see which trials are easily trials A1, B, C. And again, it graphs as an entire sheet. So please do that.